Pasadena for hosting this and also for Cross Campus part of it. I'm a member here at Cross Campus, so I can definitely vouch for how awesome the staff is here and how great the space is. So I definitely want to encourage you to sign up or check it out. So, as Christy just mentioned, I've worked on a few different projects. Today is going to be essentially a synthesis of what I do as a startup and also what I do in the enterprise space. So please find me on LinkedIn. There's the URL right there, and I'll also have that at the end of the presentation. So this morning is all about how we're going to help you future-proof your startup, and it's more specifically, the questions around your tech stack. And so, why would you want to hear this from me? Well, my technology journey started off at Johns Hopkins University. I made it through 4 years of an intense, no sleep, losing 15 pounds a semester from studying too hard kind of scenario, and I ended up with a computer science degree. And after that, I got my first disruption. September 11th happened, and so all the .com went away, and then all this defense stuff came along. So I ended up writing code for satellites, helping move data all around the planet, largely for the intelligence community. And then I said, that's not quite exciting enough. Let me go try to gather some offline data that's very hostile. So I joined the Marine Corps and ended up doing some light armored reconnaissance training. And it's an interesting way to gather data, I'll put it that way. And then, like Christy mentioned, I did my first real push into startup land, which is with Village the Game. Essentially, it's a philanthropic endeavor to show off what already works in the real world, with a game that's basically Farmville meets Zambia. So every time that you build a well inside this farm sim game that I've built, that actually helps to go fund a real well in Ndola, Zambia. And then, because giving away all your money to overseas doesn't really inspire a lot of people to invest in your company, I also do data management consulting. And I started that off in 2009, helping people, all kinds of enterprises, move lots of data around, and I got to see all kinds of problems in all kinds of industries, whether it's doing short-term work at Google or helping Bank of America figure out their data quality issues, or whatever you could imagine. That led to my current day job, working for Pentaho, where I help them find customers who are solving the whole world of big data, like moving on from traditional data to big data and helping them do that really well and do it really quickly. So here's the agenda today. My first goal is to induce a little bit of anxiety, because future-proofing your tech stack is pretty daunting. And then I want to share at least one core question about what will lead to the appropriate strategies and solutions for future-proofing your tech stack in particular. So let's set the stage here. There's a few famous faces on this slide. This guy, Jeff Bezos, started up a retailer, and it happens to own 0 stores, maybe a few experiments here and there, but we're now in this world where the largest retailer has no storefronts. And then one of the largest media companies in the world doesn't generate any of its own content. Another disruption in what media even means. And then Travis here, Kalanick, if I'm saying that right, is he started up a car company that owns no cars. So all these people have incredible, have essentially none of the fundamentals of their industry. And then on top of all of that, we now have a political leader with 0 experience in politics. So I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty disrupted right now. And between what happened in 2008, September 11th, recent political trends, it got me really thinking hard about disruption. And 2 of my favorite books that I've discovered on this whole topic of disruption and how to deal with just incredible quantities of uncertainty have been a book called The End of Power by Moises Nam, and then also The Black Swan by Nicholas Nassim Taleb. 2 great books that are essentially saying that things are just moving way faster than we ever thought possible, and that pace of change is also accelerating. So in the critical example in The End of Power is the average career span of a CEO. So many of you here today are probably aspiring to be the CEO of a startup, or you already are. Well, decades ago, you could safely count on having a 10 to 12 years, at that role. These days, keeping hold of that position has gone down to about 5 to 8 years. And that's just one example of many of like, acquiring power and developing power or keeping power is much, much more difficult. And then on top of that, there's more and more extremely rare events. And like, for example, a black swan. Up until they saw the first black swan, no one believed this would happen. So this is just to simply point out that there's all these things that are going to happen where you're not even going to accurately model for it because there is no historical data for anything. Like, there wasn't really historical data for what happened in 2008. So what does it even mean to future-proof a tech stack when you're going to see these types of crazy things that don't have any historical data to do correct modeling on? And I want to point out a couple of example questions about how this all ties in. For example, think about how you're going to keep your talent, and particularly like how does that apply to your tech stack? So, you could go with one strategy where you pick a tech stack that is everywhere. So you could just simply go, hey, WordPress talent is everywhere, so I'm going to get my minimum viable product out using that technology. And then, later on you'll just have the problems of trying to convert all of that to something that really scales. Or you could go with a strategy of doing something that's really up and coming or very, something that attracts elite programmers, and go with something like Golang, which is basically not a whole lot of ecosystem is built around it yet, but it attracts the kind of people who have like that kind of passion. The only problem is that if you pick that tech stack, you're generally going to have to compete with Facebook and Google and all the other people who want to hire the same 12 people who know how to do this. So there's the kind of interesting questions about getting ready for the future. And of course, everyone's here has some form of business that they want to expand. And what I'm seeing is the gap between when you innovate and when something becomes a commodity is getting tighter and tighter. So how do you keep your advantage when things are moving so quickly? Like, I'll talk about one tech example is, everyone has heard the name Google and how much it's helping in the world of big data. It's basically the grandfather of the big data movement. So a couple of guys at Google published a paper, and then they talk about how they were doing MapReduce and managing computation on huge quantities of data. And then roughly 10 years later, someone came up with some quality, 10 years, from when Google was building this out in-house, and then taking that and turned it into an open source project by a third party turned it into what we now call Hadoop, and which is something I have to deal with every day as part of doing data management solutions. Well, that migration from something that's a massive innovation in one company and going to commoditization has dramatically shrunk over recent years. So we're talking about like that icon right there represents on the left, that represents Google Cloud Data Flow. It's one of their cloud offerings that I've been learning more about because it affects my industry immensely. And what they just said is, well, instead of like throwing a paper over the wall and seeing what the open source community does with it, we're just going to drive it. So this one thing that started off as a massive piece of innovation at Google became a commercial offering in pretty much less than a year as what is now known as Apache Beam, which is the logo that you see to the right over there. A little bit difficult, slightly bad choice of background art or background color to see the Apache Beam logo, but again, both of these things have been migrated into the Apache Foundation and are widely adopted now. So that's a little anxiety-inducing, like how in the world do you innovate when something gets turned into a commodity offering so quickly? It's like, so all that leads to like the question of future-proofing your tech stack. And honestly, it's a bit of a joke. It's, maybe it's this. Here's your tech stack. You're future-proof. Done. Not any close. I can guarantee one thing about your current tech stack and any tech stack you might pick in the next 12 months or 24 months. You are already wrong. You are already wrong. So it's not a question of like, did I do all my planning correctly and get it right? It's just, if you can simply embrace the fact that you are already wrong, then you can think through how to be wrong effectively. It's like, how do you want to be wrong? The question is, can I pick tech where I will be 5 or 6 digits wrong instead of 7 or 8 digits wrong. Like I've heard of I don't know if you've studied the big data movement at all, but Gartner released some statistics that 70% of all big data projects fail. And big data projects are also big budget projects, usually in the, tens of millions of dollars? So failing at that is not fun for any CIO. It's just a matter of like, okay, well, now if you're looking at these experiences, how in the world are you going to avoid, that 8-digit, 9-digit failures? I would say I broke down this question into a couple of different subcomponents of technology. And so now I'm going to get a little bit more tactical with you. Essentially, like, what technology is really actually going to help you be wrong in a more effective way? The first component is being wrong about your execution environment. So most people are going to start off with some kind of like home server in their basement, and then eventually they're going to go, well, we got to scale, so we got to figure out cloud. So there's a lot of solutions there. I'm going to highlight 3 that I may have mentioned in previous slides. So this is one of the most up-and-coming technologies available for saying if you don't want to commit to where you're running your code, then one of the most predominant technologies is Docker. So Docker is going to help you take any application that you build and go, okay, well, I'm running on my laptop right now, but now I have to get it onto a real server. So it basically creates a container that allows you to migrate that incredibly quickly, very efficiently. And there's several companies building technology just around deploying that, wherever you need to and as many times as you need to. So that's definitely helped out with decisions about being wrong about where you're running your code. And on top of that, let's say you've even picked cloud. Like you already know that cloud's the future, so you're going to do that. You're going to get over all the hesitations and anxieties about security and go with the public cloud. Even if you pick the wrong cloud at first, you can just pick it up and move it over to the next cloud. So a lot of people started off at Amazon, and then they find out that Google's committed to being a price leader, so they want to save money and get better performance and jump over there. And then Docker will help you do that. On top of that, this is the plug for my day job. It's called Pentaho. It's owned by Hitachi, and their focus is on helping you take all of your data management tasks and execute those wherever you need to. So they're releasing features like the adaptive execution layer, where you can take these massive workloads of processing data, and then of course you're running it locally on a server, and then they have things where you don't have to do any rework on the workloads that you design, and now you're able to run it on Spark or some other big data tech stack like Apache Flink. And then other companies, of course, like the one I mentioned earlier was Apache Beam, which was formerly named Google Dataflow. That's also a way to help you if you want to get your hands into some code. That's another example of like, okay, well, I'm not sure which language or which platform to do all this massive data management workloads. So I'm going to go ahead and write it up in Apache Beam, and then Google is taking care of having runners on all these different platforms. So like all the big data solutions. And that's a very real concern because that space is just moving so fast, it's nauseating. Like I was just reading about how the exact same university that started up Apache Spark is now coming up with something that's 100 times better. Like everyone's like, celebrating right now because they finally got their Spark implementations done, and now there's this thing called Ray coming out that's 100 times better. So that's just the environment that we live in right now. But then there's another way to how do you be wrong about your development framework? Like, okay, you want to, of course, Python's a really big deal right now, Node's a really big deal, but maybe you got something critical wrong about the performance that you want, or something else comes along, it's like, well, this is way cool. Like, as a startup guy, like one of the things I'm struggling with right now is the temptation to go learn Go and migrate all my Python code over to there. Well, there is a strategy to deal with that. Make it data, not code. And this is something that has to happen at design level. So specifically with Village the game, what I've done is I've taken every conceivable variable inside my game and made it a line item in a Google Sheet. So why in the world would I pick something like that? I mean, Google Sheets just happens to be built out by one of the most qualified web application companies in the world. I didn't have to spend any time standing up a configuration server because Google did it for me. All I had to do is write a little bit of Python to actually connect to it. And so what I've got is this amazing ability to share with all the interns that are helping me out right now, some developers overseas. We can all just quickly modify a URL to one piece of art inside the game, and it's done. Like, there was no recompile on that code. So there won't be, if we decide one day, hey, you know what? It's time for everyone to go. Like, the only talent I can recruit wants to learn Go, so we'll switch all the Python code out. We have this available, and so far less code has to be converted because I didn't hard code all this content. So just something to think about for your startup as well. Like, you could dramatically downsize the code base for any future tech stack you might have. And then another thing I'll highlight, another tactical one, is simply, you can be wrong about who you choose for cloud storage. So like, the traditional thing was just keep everything as files on your local server, and then eventually you're gonna move it up into an Amazon S3 bucket. Well, even if you decide to move it to another cloud, the S3 protocols now support a whole bunch of different cloud offerings. So I'm actually using right now a very simple little program called CyberDuck, that's why the duck is on the screen, that helps me move data up and down with Google storage, which is the exact same protocol. So I just want to highlight that as an extremely tactical, example of how this all comes together. This chart I made several years ago to basically highlight the solution architecture for Village the game. So it's essentially what I've built out after exploring all the different possible services there are. And this is an example. I want to say this won't change over time. I've already had to change one thing. Back when I first started building this project, this used to be Google Wallet because I'm a very pro Google guy. So just, if Google does it, I'll probably ready to try it out. So that went away. So that went with PayPal's solution, Braintree. And the idea is that users are going to use their Google accounts to log into the game, which I've built purely in HTML5. And then all of that HTML5 code is being hosted on a variety of services at Google Cloud. And that's helped me not have to change my code base for the last several years of trickle development. So this nice thing is like, oh, I've actually been able to stay on one tech stack for several years now without having to change anything. And again, all this is hosted, all the content of the actual game itself is hosted on Google Sheets. So that's kind of that's the big picture of how my data management experience has informed the way that I work with my startup. And it's helped a lot with onboarding new talent and how to just deal with different kind of concerns about where code runs, what kind of storage happens, all that fun stuff. And then I want to say, like, one thing I've noticed in the industry is there's a way to even be wrong about your business model. This is the interesting one, which is all you have to do is start up your company in the pursuit of a massive multiplayer game. Because if you can do that, you can pretty much do anything. Like, if you think about all the real-time stuff that has to happen, all the syncing data over the networks and whatnot, the AI, the artificial intelligence that'll have to go into some of the non-player characters. If you can pull that off, you can pull off pretty much anything else. And one company proved that. Slack actually started off as an endeavor to build a massive multiplayer game, and then they realized that the chat client that they built was pretty awesome, and then they just decided to go to market with that. And now we all have access to Slack. That's what I use here at Cross Campus. So that's just some quick examples of how all of this pieces together. And again, it's just, you're going to be wrong. It's just a matter of how ready are you going to be for being wrong. And so I just want to leave that to you. Thank you for giving me the time to present today. I'm going to be around for questions. Please share.
Thank you so much, Darian, for teaching us how to be wrong. We are going to take questions today. You're going to stick around, so please keep any comments or stories for offline. Make sure your sentences end in a question mark. John's going to lead us.
Thanks.
Darian, thanks very much. Great presentation, kind of an eye-opener. You took us through 4 major areas to think about, and if the audience is anything like me, for several of the areas might be hanging on by the fingernails trying to follow.
Yeah.
Because it's
a lot of tech. Yeah.
But it would be helpful if you go back to that first one, because it wasn't apparent that you the one that Penta was at this one.
Yep.
There are three different things going on here in the execution environment. Would you describe how each one of these things, they're not actually competing, right? They're different parts of the execution environment. Could you explain that a little bit better, how each one of them plays a different role in the execution environment?
I say like where you're running code, all of them relate to all of these brands, companies, and technologies relate to a different way of moving data around. So Docker is my favorite, is like the favorite du jour of like Google right now, where they're just pounding out, helping people run applications that already exist. Like if you want to take WordPress, and you're like, yeah, I don't want to convert my WordPress into some kind of Python application or some other language. You can take that existing WordPress application, containerize it in Docker, and then run it on the Amazon cloud if you want. Or you could run it, say, hey, maybe Microsoft just gave you an amazing deal, so you can just quickly move it over there. So Apache Beam, for example, doesn't actually work on those types of existing applications. What they're doing is they're very focused on extremely, embarrassingly parallel data processing. So if you have to, an example is the sheer quantity of events coming in from, say, a really popular game. So if you think about it, the data that's coming in is coming in, for any successful game, is coming in constantly, and it's just huge volumes of content, but the data that you're processing is very consistent about what's going on. So they call that embarrassingly parallel. And then if you're going to do aggregation on that data, there's no such thing as batch loads. Usually most corporations are doing some kind of analytics workload by taking a daily dump of what's going on. Well, they enable a way of where you can have windows that move throughout the day to do the analytics and try to keep up with the sheer quantity of data coming in. And so what they've enabled is you can do those types of embarrassingly parallel workloads in one language and then migrate that and then execute that one language on several different runners, as they call it. So you could run it on some of the latest and greatest big data content, and then as a new one comes out, let's say Spark becomes 5 minutes ago, and now you have to move everything over to this new tech called Ray. Well, you can take this code and then run it on that Ray installation. So it's a little bit different domain that needs to be executed in multiple different places. And then the company I work for is essentially saying, well, we've already built out this visual drag and drop platform for you to do all kinds of workloads. It can be traditional data, coming out of your accounting system or your customer relationship management system, or it could be the crazy onslaught of data like social media chats. You can bring all that data together with visual drag and drop components. And the beauty of it is that when you decide, hey, this workload no longer fits in some traditional thing, like some traditional data warehouse, then you can move it over into Hadoop or into Spark without having to change any of those components without doing any rework. So it's basically, that's where I actually got the term future-proof, is this is what enterprise world is looking at, is how in the world do you build something and then keep it relevant for more than 3 years? And that's what this is doing. Yeah.
Darian?
Next question's over here.
Yeah.
This might not be in the proper confines of future-proofing, but what do you do if you acquire an IP stack? You purchase IP. Mm-hmm. It's not IP you've developed yourself.
Correct. Yeah.
You purchased it. What tips do you have to help identify if the original developer of that IP mm-hmm. is going behind your back and using it in other applications?
I've never had to deal with questions of IP theft. I've heard of some massive examples. I know that one of the companies I used to work for got caught grabbing some healthcare software and just straight up, literally copying it, like FTP off the server, copying it. So there's that kind of thing. Of course, you're gonna have someone that you trust for doing your network security and keeping track of who's actually logging into your servers and grabbing code. But my higher level answer is it would be more valuable to spend time on just having great execution yourself. Whether it's a lot of the times it's it doesn't even matter if someone steals code. It's all about the execution of the company mission itself, and that's true in a lot of different domains. Granted, if you're working on some crazy intellectual property funded by DARPA or something like that, it becomes way more critical to have this kind of security controls. And that's what, that kind of paranoia I've seen this stack. The stack of paranoia goes defense, then healthcare, then banking, and then basically everybody else. It's like, retail, analytics companies, marketing companies. Yeah. So I'm not sure which space you're working in, but yeah. So
Over here, next question.
yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about make it data, not code?
Sure.
Partly because programmers, sometimes the language they're programming in is more a religion than and so how do you communicate to your team that that's what you want to make it data, not code? How does that work physically? Like how much of it has to be code and how much of it can be data? And yes.
Yeah. Well, this is not ready. This is not to, I guess what I'm showing on the screen right now is not really meant to be understandable. It's just to be an example of what it looks like to take every little piece of code inside your game and turn it into a row of data inside a spreadsheet. So of course I'm familiar with MySQL and all these traditional solutions for having structured data being stored and doing all that thing. So, feel free to grab this concept. It's basically, I organize it just like you would a database table. You just have all your column headers at the top. And this is really getting into the weeds here, so my apologies to business users out here. But essentially, the nice thing is, like, if I ever had to change like the credentials I needed to log into my Facebook API, I don't have to change any Python code, and I can just go in and change those values right there in rows 3 and 4, and that's it. And someone who has no programming experience but can read that off of a Facebook API documentation, they, without any coding experience, can go in and change that. And that was very intentional from the very beginning of this project, is that I wanted to empower people to quickly change anything. I think I had an advantage. The reason why I think like this is because I'm not one of these guys that just enjoys programming for the sake of purity, like pure programming. Like, my brother's one of these guys where he doesn't even care what he's building, he just loves writing code. So he's not the kind of guy to think about doing something like this. I, on the other hand, is like, no, I just want to get stuff done, and I want to make it, I know I'm going to be wrong, so let me go ahead and just make it a really easy format that I don't even have to maintain. Like, I don't have to do anything to maintain, Google Sheets. It's fantastic. Like, not a single MySQL instance in this whole entire thing that I have to maintain, which I personally love. Some people love maintaining that stuff, but I'm not one of them. So, yeah. Hopefully that answered the question.
It's really helpful.
All right.
This audience is not necessarily a coding audience like myself or whatever.
Well, here's your strategy.
Right. But I didn't want to maintain my code, so I went to content management systems, and a lot of deployment can be done. Could you answer that question to the audience? Because a lot of people are waiting and they're held captive by their coders, like that last person before you.
Sure.
And then also this, because really they don't really know the big data, because the members will be putting the content in. They just need to know the framework of the content management system. So can you speak to that?
Speak to the question of like...
Well, a lot of business people have ideas. They're waiting around for funding to go hire coders and stuff. And can you speak about the code that's already available off the shelf that can create dynamic content or applications for web and or apps?
Yeah, there's it's interesting to think of, like, okay, every minute of every day there's someone coming up with a new platform. Like, there's something that took dozens of hours to build, which is now something as easy as clicking a single button. So that's just perpetually true. Like, you can think of every domain of software development. Decades ago, you actually had to write code just to create a document, and then Microsoft Word came along. I'm sure there's some predecessors to even that. So that was the first time where you went into visual drag and drop for being able to edit documents. And nowadays, like, I got sucked into the world of data management consulting by a company that showed me how to do 2 weeks of work in 5 minutes, all through drag and drop components. So there is this never-ending, relentless evolution of tools that will help you go from being dependent on a developer to doing drag and drop components yourself. So one of my favorites, very obviously, is now Pentaho. It helps people drag and drop, data management tasks. So that's, I've worked in that space long enough to realize, oh, they really know what they're doing. So I've just got really lucky this past March in joining that team. So yeah, that's the first answer, is just never-ending choices to leave behind. So if you don't have a development team, I mean, my whole intent with Village the Game was to not only have a game but also offer a platform. So everything that you see on this game right now is something that you can. Every little piece of art you see in this one example shot, like that little biosand filter sitting by the huts, I don't have to have a developer go in and change that. That's simply one URL to a piece of art sitting in Google Sheets. So it would take some foresight, and hey, I got this I got this solution. It's like, I want to take all the variables, instead of you hard coding it into Python or Java or whatever. I want to be able to have a spreadsheet that keeps all that.
I data mine with XPath.
Yeah.
So on spreadsheets.
Yeah. So I've been very happy with the solution. I've had it around for several years now. Even before this version of Village the Game, I built out an entire miniature version of Monopoly, where everything was just every piece of content was also, I just aligned it in a spreadsheet. Really straightforward. So it takes a little bit of forethought, but we can talk more about architecting that, so that you don't need developers any more than you think you need. Yeah.
Back here, again.
Sure.
Darian, just to beat a dead horse, I got a grip on the wall here, the fingernail football. So what you're saying is that this is rendered to the user or the player in HTML5.
Yep.
And then every different figure, when they click on it, it's being represented by some code you've got stored on a server, addressable by a URL.
Yeah, exactly.
And so therefore, it never changes. You just change the code at that URL from one programming language to another. User never sees it.
Right. So on the back end, if I wanted to change how something was built.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
Absolutely.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to
That's
say,
great.
keep going.
Yeah. So I used one word there, which was, is a little bit off. Is like they don't have to change any code. Like, it kind of depends on what you mean by code, like, because that term gets abused a little bit. Because like, I don't even consider a URL. Like, if you know what a web address is, just that one little piece of knowledge is really powerful these days. The amount of things that you can do. Like, imagine like just a few years ago, like right now you can take any URL and get a really nice snippet of what that content is and throw it up on Facebook, and Facebook just figures out for you what should be the preview image and what should be the title of that thing. Fantastic. That was an actual multi-hour endeavor to get that right, before that feature came out. So yeah, the power of the URL is here, and I'm sure there's even more examples out there in this audience. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Juan. Is part of your strategy for going on with this game to maintain a community of developers, content producers, artists?
Yeah, I consider myself gone from just recent like a one-man show to having a one full-time developer and now several interns. So I'm going through the learning curve right now of managing a team of that size, doing a lot of DevOps myself, delegating tasks and whatnot. And then of course, what I really want to see happen with this platform is that it goes beyond and gets used for all kinds of games, not just this particular farm sim game. So, I guess the analogy I like to use is like, I would love to become the WordPress of farm sim games. You don't have to write code in order to blog these days. You could just spin up a WordPress instance and then modify some art. So we're talking zero code solution for a particular type of game. Yeah.
All right, thank you all for the great questions. Thank you again, Darian.
Thank you.